What if Robb Stark allied with House Tyrell and married Margaery? Part 2. Let's explore the depths of it in the video. The High Sparrow gathers around a small sept in the Riverlands, looking over the gathered smallfolk. Many were sworn to the Riverlords of this region, but while their liege lords may feel loyal to their king, the same is not true for the normal people.
We stand in unprecedented times, my brothers. The realm has undergone turbulence, and none have suffered more than the good common folk such as ourselves. First, we saw the death of King Robert, and then the rise of Joffrey the Monsterous, which has led to nothing but war as Robb Stark battled the lions. All of this only ended when he made common cause with the Roses of Highgarden and defeated Stannis and the Lannisters at the Blackwater to claim the Iron Throne. And yet, while they claim the war is over, the land remains broken. You may ask yourselves, what is the cause of this suffering? But I say the answer cannot be more obvious.
He raises his hand to the sky as the people all gasp and look up at him.
This divine punishment from the heavens for our faith and the faith of the Seven Kingdoms has begun to waver. Just look at those who have called themselves king. One was a drunk who allowed corruption to thrive, and after him, a cruel monster. And now, all that remains are those who worship fallen gods. Whether it was Stannis with his fire demon, or Balon Greyjoy with his great sea monster. Even now, our King Robb prostrates himself, not to the Seven, but upon the ancient trees, with unnatural faces carved upon them.
The small folk look at each other, muttering amongst themselves as they think of the unnatural faces carved into the trees. Though rare, the weirwoods were still seen from time to time in the south.
But not all hope is lost, for our queen is devout and pious. While her husband loses himself in his pagan worship, she remains steadfast in the teachings of the new gods. Chaste as the maiden and kind as the mother, she is our hope for the future, and we must follow her example.
The small folk around him all cheer these words on as the High Sparrow concludes his sermon. But this is just one of many he does across the Seven Kingdoms, traveling not just to the Riverlands, but also the Vale, Westerlands, Reach, and Stormlands. But he takes it a step further. Though Margaery begs for time, the High Sparrow has a more immediate solution. There can be no worship without icons. Though Margaery might be immune from criticism, Robb is still a pagan follower. By increasing her own influence, Margaery has diminished her kings. Robb himself does not know how to respond. He refuses to denounce the religion his father had practiced, especially as his father was beheaded right at the steps of the holiest site in the Seven Kingdoms. Though he marks several announcements urging peace and tolerance, these only go so far. Violence begins to escalate in the kingdom. These aren't the major wars the Seven Kingdoms just experienced, but smaller isolated acts of destruction. Northmen are harassed on the streets when they journey south. Foreigners are looked on with distrust, and religious icons are smashed. One of the most brazen attacks is when a group of sparrows breaks into Raventree Hall and attempts to cut their weirwood tree down. Though Lord Blackwood puts a stop to this, he is furious and knows that Janos Bracken is behind it. War is only prevented by Robb, who urges him to calm down, but warns that any further acts of violence against the trees are punishable by death. Margaery tries to discourage these suggestions, saying that they will only lead to more suffering, and suggests lesser punishments. However, the Northmen, even those who follow the faith of the Seven, are outraged. Rather than discourage this, the High Sparrow is infuriated, seeing this as heresy that Robb would compare a simple tree to holy icons similar to those of the new gods. Many sparrows begin to chop down these ancient trees. What few weirwood trees they find are destroyed, but it isn't just sparrows. Westerlords and Stormlanders see the opportunity to retaliate against the Starks and Tyrells, who see this as betraying the Baratheon dynasty. While the Northmen and their followers try to preserve as many as they can, putting countless sparrows and rebellious smallfolk to death, it is not enough. All the while, Margaery urges Robb to calm down, telling him to avoid escalating the war any further. She tries to meet with the High Sparrow, urging him to cease these efforts, but he is adamant and says that this defiance can go no longer. But it isn't just the trees themselves that suffer. Cracks begin to show in the realm. With these divisions, the crown is losing its ability to control its people. The king finds it difficult to deal with it. Things were much easier in the north, not just because they shared his faith, but now the Stark name matters much less here, especially given the treason accusations that hang over their heads. Now he finds himself having to rely on Margaery for more of his public events, letting her be the face of the realm while he remains on the sidelines. She manages to calm things down, having sparrows and the worst offenders punished, but she cannot stop them all. All the while, she urges Robb to convert, even in name only, to at least weaken the sparrow's support. However, the king cannot bring himself to do it, not when they continue to desecrate his gods, not when the High Sparrow refuses to compromise. This causes the Tyrells no small amount of frustration, as this leaves them trying to control the sparrow on their own. With the north facing increasing persecution, Robb cannot always bring them down to help. More importantly, there are a few reports on growing trouble at the Wall, as some claim they spot White Walkers just beyond the realm. Margaery isn't the only one who notices and takes advantage of this. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen notices this chaos and sees an opportunity. While they had united the realm, she freed Slaver's Bay and now finds an opportunity to attack. Together with her husband, Aegon VI, they sail to the west, landing on the Stepstones where they begin probing attacks along the coast of the Seven Kingdoms. Even with their dragons, it is a difficult battle, and they lose several ships. However, they hear of tensions within the Reach, and Stormlands provide an opportunity. Many lesser lords who sided with Stannis and fled east found themselves in the Golden Company. They are enticed with the opportunity to return home and offer to lead them there. House Fell, Morgan, and remnants of the Florents are among those who offer their aid. Some Reachmen are also tired of Margaery's alliance with the Faith, seeing it as a threat to their rule as the Sparrows meddle in their affairs. The Targaryen forces make their landing near the marshes, split into two columns, one in the Stormlands and the other in the Reach, to capture strongholds along the coast and pushing deeper inland. The Marcher lords, once sworn to the Tyrells and Baratheons, fractures under the pressure, with some lords defecting to Aegon VI in hope of securing new power, while others remain loyal to Highgarden. Meanwhile, religious zealots from both sides continue to pour into the conflict. The Sparrows wage holy war against Targaryen loyalists and those they deem heretics. However, other sects see the Targaryens as their chance to restore their faith in the crown, and eagerly urge their followers to join Daenerys and Aegon. Margaery's family gathers their banners and rides south to quell this threat. While not a gifted commander, he still has the loyalty of House Tarly and can use their forces to quell the rebellion. He marches to the castle, one by one, to try and halt their advance. However, the dragons halt this advance, burning through his first army and forcing him to retreat, barely saving himself from the chaos. In the Stormlands, Robb Stark wages his relentless campaign. As he and his Northmen march through the lands, they see they are far from welcome there, being regarded as little better than the invaders, but focuses his forces entirely on driving the Targaryens from the Stormlands. But he proves himself to be a brilliant tactician. Many young knights and lordlings rally to his cause, and together he wins a string of victories. Though the Golden Company are fierce, they lack the dragons and are simply another army. Robb's military campaign shines through, as rather than face them directly, he circles the Stormlands, targeting their coastal holdings and those along the King's Road, to prevent them from gathering or reinforcing. When they finally clash near the Rainwood, Robb has the better of it. The fighting is some of the fiercest he's encountered, having to contend with the discipline of the Golden Company. But under the arrow storm of their archers, he manages to reach their defensive position, atop a ridge. His knights dismount and advance on foot, with locked shields, keeping their movements slow and disciplined, so when they arrive, they are more than prepared to fight hand to hand. This fighting is fierce, and though the Golden Company is better trained, the Royalists have the numbers, and it swings back and forth. At several points, the Royalists manage to gain the upper hand and secure a foothold, only to be driven back. However, Robb continues to rally his men, and even manages to defeat an attempted flanking maneuver when Greywind hears the men trying to sneak up behind them and has his men beat it back. Eventually, his numbers win the day, and the Golden Company are dislodged from their position. Sensing his emotional turmoil, Daenerys crafts a trap. Rather than pulling her dragons back to reinforce Aegon's forces in the Stormlands, she makes a bold, sacrilegious move. She orders the Isle of Faces to be burned. The weirwood grove there, one of the holiest sites of the old gods, is set ablaze. The skies turn red with fire and ash as Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion reduce the ancient trees to cinders. Even the sparrows cheer this on and join in. The act is a direct challenge, a provocation designed to draw Robb into battle on her terms. Upon hearing this, Robb is thrown into a fury. He rides right to the coast of the Stormlands, slaughtering every sellsword and sparrow who his army comes across in retaliation. Rather than attack Daenerys directly, he instead turns his attention to the Stepstones, where they make his base, and begin launching a brutal campaign. Their camps and strongholds are taken there, but this time Robb doesn't just capture them. He pays destruction for destruction, burning their camps and belongings, their ships, and their wealth. Meanwhile, this gives the Tyrells a chance to solidify their rule over the Seven Kingdoms. With Robb gone, someone must take lead, and though Waymond Manderly tries to keep things together, Mace and the other Southerners gain increasing influence within the city. While the Unsullied are unfazed by this and continue their campaign in the Reach, many sellswords are horrified. Even the Golden Company, with its vaunted discipline, cannot stand to watch their wealth being destroyed and urge them to return. Daenerys and her dragons are the first to return, but they find Robb using the labyrinthian cave system of the islands to evade aerial attacks, launching ambushes and nighttime raids that whittle down the Targaryen forces. For a brief moment, it seems as if Robb's vengeance might turn the tide of the war. But then, the true enemy arrives. The destruction of the weirwood trees matters little to them, but in reality, it has a greater effect than they realize. These were not only sacred, they were tied to the magic of the old gods. The destruction can lead to their magic weakening, including the spells weaved into the wall, and soon, the White Walkers learn about this and begin their assault. As the men of the Night's Watch wake up one day, they find themselves greeted by the sight of the dead, far more than they ever expected. They pour out of the haunted forest and begin their assault. Urgent word is sent to Robb Stark in the south, begging him for reinforcements. The North rushes as many troops as they can to this front, trying to reinforce the Night's Watch. By the time Robb receives word, he is still fighting in the Stepstones, with some success, but he is unable to take down the dragons or secure a permanent victory. Instead, his forces are getting bogged down with the endless fighting, requiring constant reinforcements. By now, depression is starting to set in with him and his men. Many of them question what they are still fighting for, and while some are disgusted with the sacrilege of the Targaryens, some wish to return home. Soon enough, they see several Manderly ships arrive. At first, they think it is reinforcements there to help them secure their rule, but to their surprise, Waymond Manderly appears with grim news. The news weighs heavily on Robb. He looks at the sea around him, and the bleak islands he sits on at the edge of the world, and questions what he is doing. That, and a dozen more questions run through his mind, but there is only one answer he can think of. This is not his place, and he should not be here. But the situation is complex. With his forces in the Stepstones, he is still under the shadow of the dragon, and it will be difficult to withdraw his forces immediately. That is, unless he can come to peace terms with them. To Daenerys' surprise, he offers to discuss terms and withdraw from the Stepstones entirely. Confused, Daenerys suspects a trick and initially refuses, but Robb presses her and even suggests they meet to negotiate terms. Robb sails back to the mainland accompanied by a few advisors to discuss these terms. They meet at Sunspear, a land untouched by where Daenerys, Aegon, and his queen all arrive. The fighting on the mainland continues to rage, and all sides are fighting to make war.
I will speak to all of you. There is trouble in the north. The wall is failing, and a foe far greater than any we've encountered threatens to break down our door. We must stand together if Westeros is to survive.
The dead have come for us. The Night's Watch holds them back, but they struggle. If we do not act now, the North will fall.
And you expect us to simply abandon our war for the throne to fight shadows and legends? If you believe this is legend, then you are a fool. I have spent too long consumed by this war, by vengeance. But none of it matters if we're all dead. I will not let my people be slaughtered while we fight amongst ourselves like children.
And what do you propose, Stark?
Peace. For now. We must unite. We can settle our differences later, but if we do not put aside our quarrels now, we will all be nothing more than frozen corpses. So you expect us to simply march north to your homeland with our armies? A tad convenient for you, is it not?
I will not have my husband's honor questioned by the likes of you, Pretender.
Pretender? The dragons have ruled for hundreds of years. You are simply a rose who has forgotten who allowed you to bloom.
The Tyrells have bloomed long without the dragons, just as the realm has survived without them.
And what a job you've done. When we arrived, the Faith was close to overthrowing your king. How do we know that this is not some ploy for you to secure the Iron Throne? The Iron Throne? I no longer care for it.
Take it. Play your games. Stab each other in the back over a damn chair if that's what you want. My father died because of Southern politics. My men have bled for it, and my homeland suffers for it. No more. I renounce my claim if that's what it will take. I will fight for the North, for Westeros, not for a crown.
Husband, you cannot mean to renounce your claim. Think of what you are doing.
I am. Remember what you told me. Should I not like ruling, I can always find someone else. Well, I find that I have no stomach for this.
You would give up everything for this war?
Aye. If what you say is true, then we will lend our forces. Fine. But the moment this war is over, you can fight for your throne. I will be in the north, ensuring my people live to see another day.
The White Walkers strike first at Eastwatch by the Sea. A terrible cracking sound echoes as the wall's ancient magic splinters. As its foundation weakens, an ice storm kicks up, leaving them perfectly vulnerable to an attack. The White Walkers ride atop midnight spiders, each as large as a horse, and with long ropes tied to their spindly legs, letting whites climb up after them. Jon Snow and the Night's Watch receive some hasty reinforcements and try to hold them back. As the first spiders reach the top, they are greeted by a barrage of arrows. One rears its legs back, but the Lord Commander slashes its rear legs and sends it tumbling over the edge. However, the rest of the wall is having less luck as more of the creatures reach the top. Their tiny foothold grows by the second. Jon fights relentlessly. Longclaw slices through the icy flesh of the whites, but for everyone he slays, more rise. The Night King himself advances, a spear of glacial ice in his hand, and hurls it into the base. The entire structure shudders at the very foundation as cracks begin to fall. Suddenly, the ground a few feet away from Jon gives way, and men are sent screaming to their deaths. The Night King offers no reprieve as he prepares to do this once again. Jon orders everyone off the wall. Word is sent to the other castles, ordering them to retreat and to make for Winterfell. Some lords try to resist, and others fall back with them. The Dreadfort, once an impenetrable fortress, is taken in a single night. The bodies of its defenders rise by dawn, now part of the Night King's ever-growing horde. Carhold is next, its gates frozen solid and shattered. Those who did not flee in time are consumed by the darkness, their screams echoing into nothingness. Deepwood Motte is evacuated, and just as the Glover brothers sail off, they can hear the forest howling, thick with the undead. Those by the coast flee to White Harbor or Bear Island, while those inland escape to Winterfell. They receive some hopeful news that the Coalition is on its way up. The Coalition army hastily marches north, gathering forces as they advance. Robb Stark takes command of this force. Whatever issues they have with him as king, none can fault his generalship. Here he is commander, decisive and brave. He rallies the scattered men together, organizing them into a disciplined force. But dire news greets them. Winterfell is on the verge of collapse, besieged by the Night King's forces. Robb recalls his father's words. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. He had left Sansa to hold it, but she is inexperienced in war, and the castle itself is crumbling beneath the onslaught. Worse still, the destruction of their weirwoods, the old god's presence, has faded. The Night King, no longer bound by their ancient magics, seems even stronger. The storm of ice and death rages over the north. The Night King stands at the head of this monstrous legion, his icy gaze fixed upon Winterfell as his undead army encircles the castle. The defenders fight bravely, being led by some of the northern lords as Sansa comforts the women and children. Despite their best efforts, the castle becomes increasingly untenable. Every day the whites swarm the walls, first with their undead beasts that rip and tear into the soldiers, and then their undead humans, and finally, the White Walkers, great spiders. All the while, the cold seeps into their bones, sapping their strength. Then, fire answers ice. A roar splits the frozen air as Drogon descends from the stormy skies, his black wings cutting through the darkness like a blade alongside Daenerys. Behind her, Rhaegal and Viserion unleash torrents of dragonfire, carving a burning pathway toward Winterfell. The flames engulf whites by the thousands, momentarily pushing back the tide of the undead. With the dragons above, Robb leads the cavalry in a desperate charge. The knights scream into the night, their swords and lances cutting through the horde. Northern riders, Vale Knights, and Reach bannermen ride alongside them, carving a narrow escape route for the remaining people in Winterfell. Under the cover of Dragonfire, Sansa Stark leads the last Winterfell's people southward, retreating towards safety as the battle rages on. As she escapes, Robb wheels and prepares for another charge to buy them some time. The last of those to escape are Jon and his Knights Watchmen, but as Robb orders them to get behind them, they feel it. The cold returns, and with it, the Night King himself. The ground trembles beneath their charge, the clash of steel and the cries of men echoing through the battlefield. At the head of the attack, Robb and Aegon VI ride side by side, their blades cutting through the whites as they carve a path toward the Night King. The Night King does not move. Robb and Aegon reach him. With all their might, they strike. Valyrian steel and dragon glass meet ancient ice. The Night King falters. A wound opens upon his chest, and a strange, unearthly scream escapes his lips, but he does not shatter. Instead, he raises a hand and unleashes a surge of raw, icy power, sending two warriors hurtling back. The charge falters. The dead press forward once more, their unholy strength overwhelming the scattering forces of the living. The only thing that stops them from getting mobbed is Daenerys, who strafes the battlefield once more.
Fall back!
The two look at one another and fall back. The people are out, but Winterfell has fallen. All they can do is rush back and hope to regroup with the remaining of their forces. Throughout the day, Robb wheels his horses around and tries to ram into the undead, smashing into their ranks to buy his group some time to escape. Sometimes the dead are right on top of them, and they barely escape by the skin of their teeth. However, by the time they reach Barrowtown, Daenerys and her forces have arrived. The tattered remnants of Robb and Aegon's cavalry retreat behind the tight ranks of the Unsullied, standing behind the disciplined Westerosi men-at-arms and sellswords that create a wall of shields and swords, holding the line as Robb and Jon recover from their failed attack. The battle grinds into a brutal stalemate. The forces of the living barely hold back the unending tide of the dead. Jon, Robb, and Aegon ride up and down the lines, trying to rally their men and hold up. But even as they fight, they can feel the immense cold brewing over them as the Night King approaches. Above them, Daenerys unleashes another burst of fire, burning the whites around him. But the Night King remains unaffected and marches forward, his icy sword gleaming dangerously. The three raise their swords and rush at him, and yet the Night King moves like a nightmare, his movements precise and aggressive, never failing to halt their attacks. With each strike, he forces them back. Cursing, Aegon rushes in, Blackfire in hand. He ducks under one slash and then drives his sword across his knee. Although it unsteadies him, the Night King does not fall, and instead grabs him by the throat. Frost begins to form around his neck as the Night King prepares to drive his sword into him. Jon moves at the last moment and hacks at his hand, chipping away at the ice and forcing him to retreat. The Night King turns to face him, his sword flashing out and sending Jon back. It cuts a line across his chest, but Robb takes his attention and comes from a third side. The three try to swarm him, preventing him from targeting any one of them, and wearing the Night King down. With each time they clash, a few more of their attacks get through, and cracks begin to show in the Night King's armor. Bit by bit, he begins to tire. Robb sees this and rushes forward, pulling his longsword back as he aims a cut across his waist, but then the Night King's sword flashes and drives right into his stomach. The two scream as Robb glances down, staring at the sword as it drives deeper. As it comes down, he falls to the ground. Jon screams and rushes at the Night King. His fury is like nothing ever before, and he rains down attacks on him while Aegon comes in lock, hacking at his body. Their unexpected ferocity takes the Night King off guard, and at last, one strike hits him on the neck and severs his head from his body. Before his body even hits the ground, Jon rushes over to see his brother.
Robb, you will be okay.
Lying was never our strong suit, Jon. It's why we make such shit politicians. Don't be upset, though. I'm in the north, and I fought for it.
They will remember this. If nothing else, you made things right here, and we shall not forget that.
Not with you leading them. I've failed the north, but you will do better than me. Lead them well.
Jon's eyes widen, but before he can protest, he sees his brother's eyes glazing over and simply offers a nod. As the battlefield clears, he begins rebuilding. The armies of the Seven Kingdom return home. Having heard of Robb's death, Daenerys and Aegon offer their condolences, and Jon assures them that he will not attempt to claim the Iron Throne. Instead, Jon satisfies himself with ruling the North and caring for his nephew. Although saddened to give up queenship, and even more to see Robb dead, Margaery decides the same. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.